My name's Saranjit Birdi. I work in what we call combined arts practice now. So it incorporates dance, movement, music, and sculptural installations. I've always been interested in local narratives, and one of my colleagues, his mother had experienced a bombing blitz of Coventry, and so I interviewed her. And we had a whole dialogue about her experience. And I thought, it's so powerful, I want to incorporate it within a musical score. And that's going to be the vehicle which we're going to perform to. I was really interested in dynamics of movement and paint and throwing paint around, a bit like Jackson Pollock, but taking it off the canvas and making it part of a sort of narrative and a performance, and where it has meaning. That performance grew. We presented it in this gallery space in 2011. After that, I really was interested in the other side of the story, because I felt, I just had half the story. I then wanted to go to Dresden and find out from there, from the German perspective, what it was all about for them. And I tried and tried and tried to get funding, to find a route through, and it was nigh impossible for years. I kept trying. But then about 2015, someone suggested I talk to a chap called John Yedden, a local artist who'd been setting up the Coventry-Dresden exchange. So I came to one of the exhibitions he was putting on. I met him briefly, and he said, there's an exhibition of the exchange coming up. So on the last day of the exhibition, they were all having a meal. So I thought, I've got to get there, tag on and do my networking. And during that sequence, I went around each individual and said, I want to go to Dresden, I want to do some research, and, would you be up for collaborating or helping me? And an artist called Jean Kirsten, he showed some interest, and he had similar background in using dance and in his artwork. So then I went about trying to get international funding, and then I needed to have contacts in Dresden. I wrote an email to the mayor's office in Dresden, and within 2 days they came back with a list of people that might help me. One was Barbara Lubick. She was interested in film, dance, and knew a little bit about the art community there. She said she would be a second host. So I went over in 2016, met with Barbara, explained Bombed Part 1, and she said, we've got an interesting development going on in Dresden. It's called Zentral Work. It's an old munitions factory that the Nazis used for bomb manufacture and artillery. And she said, we've got a theatre space there, and we're converting it into artist studios and artist residency spaces, but also for just normal flats and development. So I turned up at this place. Half the buildings were derelict, ruins, and then construction had just started on a part of it. We walked into this theatre space, and when she said this theatre space was where they showed propaganda, Nazis showed propaganda movies. And I just thought, it's incredible, because the whole issue about bombing, terrorism, the fear of bombing, what better place than to perform it here? And then I came back to England, still couldn't get any funding. And then 2 years later, I got an email from Britt Magden. She was the director of Societats Theatre in Dresden, and they were doing a festival called Scene Europa, and it was getting to be post-Brexit. So really interested what we in Britain were thinking about post-Brexit and our multicultural communities here, because Dresden was a very divided community. The far right was expanding again. When I went for my research, I'd already interviewed Sean Kirsten's mother, who gave a fantastic testimony of her experience in the German Blitz. And so I had this material to work with. So what I did was expand the music score for Bombed 1, where I had the dialogue from Joan Edkins and incorporated the dialogue of Hannah Kirsten, John's mother. And so it became a 40-minute work. Managed to perform it, came back to UK. I had a meeting with Dominic Bubb at the Herbert, who was the curator in the original 2011 work. And I said, well, I'd like to now present both works as a final exhibition. So we agreed in 2020, on the November anniversary of the bombing, we would have this final exhibition. And then COVID hit, and so everything had to be scrapped. And all the research and planning I'd done for that was really, lost, and I had to redo the whole thing again. There's about 3 months worth of work. But then another opportunity came up where a colleague of mine said there's a cemetery in Birmingham, Warstone Lane Cemetery. The cemetery had just had refurbishment works, and they wanted to encourage people to come and visit it because part of it was like a heritage park. So then an idea came for part 3, because what triggered that also, she said Birmingham had been blitzed in the war, but there wasn't a lot of publicity around it. For some reason they kept it under wraps, and whereas Coventry and Dresden have had a lot of research done, Birmingham was sort of a little bit behind, and the Jewellery Quarter Cemeteries projects have started to archive dialogues and starting to do research around the Birmingham Blitz. And I thought, wow, it's fascinating. I'd really like to explore that, because it's my hometown as well. Gone to Coventry, gone to Dresden, and then come back to my hometown, Birmingham. It just had this circularity about it. And Bombed full circle just happened. And that was basically 2 animations. One was a series of paintings and drawings I'd done, and a musical piece was made even longer than we had in Dresden. I did a second animation just using the works by local people and participants. These 2 animations were then shown on a projection on the wall. And then we had performances of poetry by Phil Thompson, and one of my dancers who had been in Bombed 1, he'd become a rap artist, and he's done a brilliant track. Unfortunately, because COVID was happening, we had to postpone it 3 times and keep re-establishing the timing of it, but finally we did it, and we could only get like 30-40 people to the performance. So then we had these 3 events, and I came back to Dominic and I said, got another exhibition proposal, it's called a Trilogy now, and he said, yeah, let's go for it.